Dominic Waddles.
And I'm Mark Rosenblatt.
And this is the MDetroit podcast.
MDetroit is a podcast where we interview the artists of Detroit. We discuss their art, their lives, and so many other topics. And in doing this, we hope to create a platform for artists to share their work. And for you, the listener, to find out more about that artist. Dom, why don't you tell us who is this week's podcast?
So this week's podcast is the two powerhouse duo, JSpangler and Tbone Paxton. Why don't you tell us about them, Mark?
Man, this podcast, we talked about, I don't know what we didn't talk about. Honestly, we talked about everything. RJ and Tbone have been part of the scene for so long. They started playing in a band called Kawumba, which is now called the Sun Messengers. And this all started in the 70s. So we talked to them about that, them growing up in Detroit and playing in Detroit in the 70s and 80s and through the years and all of so many stories that they had. It was so amazing, and we sat there and we listened, and it was just a flashback to a time where music was everywhere. So I mean, their stories just on their own are just so magical and inspiring, and we had a really great time. They also talked to us about how to actually be not just a musician, but like to be an entertainer, to make the crowd or your audience, whoever it is who's listening, to actually really like be entertained. It was a wonderful podcast. So without further ado, please enjoy RJ Spangler and Tbone Paxton.
In your own backyard. Oh, back in your own backyard.
All right, welcome back to the MDetroit podcast. I forgot my mount, so I'm holding the mic this time. But today's podcast, on podcast 4, we have JSpangler and Tbone Paxton. Yeah. How are you guys doing?
Well, considering COVID days, and this is the day before lockdown for 3 weeks.
Right.
We're on a precipice of that anyway. I'm okay. I'm all right. Tbone?
Man, I'm doing good. I'm flattered that you asked me to be here, and I'm just happy to be back on the east side. My old stomping grounds. Drove across town to be with you guys.
We're in my living room for those of you in
right. We are in RJ's
land.
living room.
Yeah.
RJ in the house, in his house.
In my house, yes.
Yep. Yeah. So the way we like to start these podcasts off is by reading you guys your bio. And after that, we have some questions. We want to just get right into the serious nitty gritty.
Oh my.
Yep. All right, so we're gonna read your bio. So here goes. Lifelong buddies JSpangler and Tbone Paxton started working together in 1980 with a very popular band around Detroit called the Sun Messengers. They toured the East Coast, Midwest, and Deep South for a number of years. Back then, Tbone was awarded a Motor City Music Award for Best Trombonist. Since that time, he has also become quite an engaging vocalist. In fact, he has been nominated the last 2 years as Best Jazz Vocalist at the Detroit Music Awards. The two are cornerstone members of the 9-piece band Planet D Nanette, and as such have toured to 11 states, released as many CDs, and garnered 6 Detroit Music Awards. Now they have to offer the Stripe Down project, just 4 musicians with a new CD about to drop. And this was referring to Back in Your Own Backyard.
Right, which came out last March.
Correct.
Yeah.
Tbone and RJ have performed in New Orleans and back singers from there on their tours up north like Johnny Adams, Earl King, Eddie Bow for many years. So the music of NOLA is always prominent in their performances.
Yeah.
From trad jazz to R&B. The Great American Songbook, Johnny Mercer, Hoagie Carmichael, Duke Ellington, and the Harlem Jive of Fats Waller, as well as the proto jump swing of Louis Jordan are also a big part of each performance. Add some gut bucket trombone and RJ's experience with blues, swing, and world jazz on drums, and you have an idea of what to expect at their shows. They are favorites at festivals, art fairs, jazz clubs, brew pubs, private parties, as well as libraries.
So now, hearing your bio, what would you guys add or change to change it into present day?
Well, I need to update that the CD has already come out.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Otherwise, that's pretty accurate. You know, Tbone and I actually met in the 70s and started playing together. But I started in a band called Kuumba, which means creativity in the points of Kwanzaa, as you might know this. I don't know, Dominic. I've met people who don't know what the points of Kwanzaa are, but one of the points of Kwanzaa is Kuumba, creativity. And we're in a band called Kuumba in the 70s. And by 1980, we changed the name to the Sun Messengers. And that's really officially when John and I started working together. I'd say you were kind of a peripheral member of Kuumba, John?
Yeah, I thought I was a member. I thought I was in Kuumba before we changed the name. I don't know if that's true or not, though. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think you were there at the last iteration of Kuumba.
At the very last, but I was hanging out.
Yeah, you were there.
I saw my first concert that I saw of Kuumba was the infamous historic performance at the Lions Club on
Oh, you were there.
Harper and
1978,
I think. Yeah.
Care to share the story of this infamous performance?
Oh, it was unbelievable. RJ, he tells much better.
This goes back to when I was a kid. You know, I mean, we had a band we put together with just kind of like a bunch of guys that lived. Okay, we're just blocks from where this all started. Right now, we're in Grosse Pointe. For those of you who are listening to this podcast, we're just a few streets from the city of Detroit, though. Mm-hmm. It's Nottingham, Beaconsfield, Lake Point, Maryland, Weyburn, Alta Road. Alta Road's the first street of Detroit. I lived in the next street over, Ashland. This is 1977. I lived on Ashland in Detroit. Just a few blocks over from here. But it was a whole other world. It was Detroit. And I lived on a canal. And it was a group made of people that lived in Detroit in that neighborhood. It was a mixed race group. And most of the people in that group, it was about a 12-piece group, most of the people could walk to rehearsal or lived in the house. It was sort of a communal band. Like the baritone player Jabbar lived in the group. The trumpeter Musa lived in the house. They both lived with us. I lived there, of course. It was my house that I was renting. Akunda, who played percussion, lived on Manistee, the next street over. The original trombone player was named James Bud Kane, lived on Manistee, the next street over. James O'Donnell, a trumpeter, lived like 4 blocks over on Lakewood. You're getting a picture. This was a real neighborhood band. Mm-hmm. And that was this group called Kuumba. And just a couple years ago, we released a 40-year anniversary of that band, a CD. And our drummer, I played congas in that group. The drummer, Sule, he just died just a week or so ago.
October 30th.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago. And he survived COVID. But when he went in to find out that he had COVID, they did this blood work and found out he had riddled with cancer and died.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he was a beautiful cat, a hell of a drummer, and a friend of mine for all these years. And so we had this band. It was like a community neighborhood band. We were just kids, you know. We would play at like backyard parties, and you know, we didn't know much about, you know, the music business or anything. You know, we were just young guys. You know, we were playing street parties and at art openings and coffee houses. You know, I mean, things you do when they're really young. You know what I mean? Trying to get something going on in the music world. But we weren't thinking about the music business. We were just trying to get out and play.
But you were all a very musically well-informed
Yeah, we had these two older guys that lived at my house. One was 35, one was 36, and they had a lot of experience that they were teaching us. Right, they were like mentoring us young guys. Right, and so we were rehearsing 3 nights a week, whether we had a gig or not. We were very disciplined, and we were transcribing and learning and practicing and all this stuff. And during the days, we would shed, and it was a real jazz experience. And like Belgrave didn't live far away, and he'd come by and check up on us and other guys. It was a real heady time in the 70s. You know what I mean? And there was a lot of musicians lived on that same block. Like a great drummer named Danny Spencer lived in that block. Danny Spencer played, and like he when he left that block, he moved to San Francisco and played in Joe Henderson's band.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah, when he was in Detroit, he played in Ken Cox's band, CJQ. They made 2 records on Blue Note with him on drums. Yeah, Danny Spencer's a great drummer, still alive.
We talked to Vincent Chandler, and he was telling us about Ken Cox.
Yeah. Well, his drummer on those 2 Blue Note records he made was Dan Spencer. He was my neighbor on this, like 5 doors down across the street.
Amazing.
On this block, and on the other end of the block was a woman named same block. I'm not saying like up the same street, the same exact block, 5 doors down was a woman named Mickey Braden. Mickey Braden sings on at least one, if not several, James Carter CDs. And she's made a career singing on off-Broadway and Broadway, doing like Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith and that kind of thing. And these are my neighbors. This is where I live. I just happened to move there.
Yeah.
And kind of built this kind of nutty coterie of jazz disciples around me. And I was hanging out downtown, and especially in the Cass Corridor, there was a group called the Griot Galaxy. Have you guys ever heard of them?
No.
The Griot Galaxy was a group built around a guy named Farouk Zibay, who was this great avant-garde saxophone player. And he had a bass player named Jaribu Shahid. Jaribu was a hell of a bass player. He plays every Tuesday or every other Tuesday that he switches up with Pedras over at the Dirty Dog. He tours around the world with Roscoe Mitchell from the Art Ensemble in Chicago, and he tours around the world with David Murray. He's a world-class bass player. He's incredible. He's my age. But he was already a great bass player then. And we would go see these guys playing at this place called Cobb's Corner, which is not what Cobb's Corner is today.
Right.
Cobb's Corner on a Monday night at $2 a head, they would be making $800 at the door.
That's amazing.
In 1977. That's how many people would come to go see live jazz on a Monday night. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People went, and it would be my age, be 18, 19-year-olds. You could drink legally at 18 when I was 18. So people were out, and black people and white people, and it'd be 65-year-olds and it'd be 18-year-olds. And it was, races were mixed up, ages were mixed up. People, if you loved the music, people didn't care. That was the era that we grew up in. And the other thing that was great is we grew up in an era when, like, when you play gigs, there'd be girls your age at that gig.
Yeah, man.
Right.
I'm going to move off that stop. Okay.
We'll talk about that after the podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Because men like this sort of thing. Anyway, so moving right along. We were building up this thing with Kaumba, and we were like disciples of music, and it was a lot of odd metered stuff and modal jazz, and we were highly influenced by this group, the Griot Galaxy, and you know what a griot is, right? Okay, well, a griot is a French word, but it's used in Senegal as a keeper of the tribe's history. Of the Senegalese and the in Gambia. He plays the kora, and he sings these tribal songs, and the history of the tribe is kept in song form. They sing these songs. So griot goes to that. So Griot Galaxy, Griot, Griot Galaxy. So that's some deep shit, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we were devotees of this group. We were deep into Sun Ra. We're deep into all this kind of stuff. And so we had this band. We were creating our own our own language, because Jabbar, who was like 15 years old than us, he's writing us songs. We're going out and hearing live music all the time. And so we would go out and play all these little parties in the neighborhood around here and art shows, and people were starting to, and like I said, coffee houses, and people were getting to see who we were. And so Rick, who was my partner, Rick Steiger, we co-founded this band together. His dad belonged to his Lions Club over here in Harper on the east side. And he said, I think I can get Dad's Lions Club for the night. We can put on our own show, and we'll charge the door, and we'll do something, put on our own gig. Because this is before DIY existed, the idea of do it yourself, right? We just, this is my mentor, John Sinclair. You guys hip to John Sinclair at all? He was he invented the Ann Arbor Blues and Jazz Festival, and he kind of taught me a lot of things about promotion and presenting jazz on a do-it-yourself level, right? And so we just made up our own flyers and got this hall for the night, and we put on this show. As John said, it was a legendary show because it was completely packed, and we'd never put on our own show before. We didn't know anything about doing this, but it was a wildly successful night. And we saved all the money, and we made a recording of the band. It was the goal, was to take the money and record the group. And we went. It was my first time ever being in a recording studio, and we still have a picture of us from that day. No one can find the recording. We've lost that because that was over 40 years ago. But a picture still exists from us going into the studio that day, and that was that in 1978. And John wasn't even in a group then, but he was around. He was at that gig.
Well, I James had brought me around your house before that,
right?
But that was the first concert that I saw, and but Blood was already there. Gary Lane was there, so those spots were covered. I was just James wanted me to come by and see what an amazing experience it was, and that's why I ended up being there.
James being James O'Donnell, who's been my co-leader in these various projects for all these years. James O'Donnell and John Paxton went to high school together at Denby on the east side. They were in a band together in high school. So
yeah, James is my oldest
you talk,
living
John.
friend
running my mouth
colleague
here.
in life. I have other friends people that I knew that I went to school with that predated James, but they're not personal friends. James is my oldest friend in life. And we met in Denby High School in 1975. And we've been musicians and friends and colleagues ever since, brothers, just like RJ. So, James brought me around, and I got to experience the band, and it was quite an experience, It really was. It was an amazing, that concert at the Lions Club was just filled with so much energy. And I was already exposed to a lot of really, really good music my whole life. My father was a musician, professional musician, and I'm the youngest of 9 and the 7th son, So my dad was born in 1916. So this new thing, the radio, came out when he was 8 years old, 1924, and this newfangled music came on the scene, which immediately took his ear. And so he was a jazz age guy, and he got his Detroit Local 5 union card when he was 15 years old, and had it for 63 years or until he died,
John's dad was not only a musician, but he was also an educator in the Detroit public school system. He taught band in Detroit schools. And so I think John should tell people who might be interested, some of his students went on to be, you mentioned Ken Cox?
Yeah, Kenny Cox.
Was one of John's dad's students.
Wow.
Yeah, Kenny Cox was a capable musician by the time he met my father in middle school. I believe Kenny was in the Von Steuben years. My dad was at Von Steuben.
Middle school.
And so Kenny recognized that my dad was a skilled and advanced jazz musician. So Kenny would go to him and say, Mr. Paxton, can you show me this? Can you show me this? Can you show me this? And Kenny Cox would always give me a hug. And he'd say, I just loved your father, And George Davison, my dad taught him his rudiments. He learned his snare rudiments from Freddie Paxton, and that was George was also, I believe, at Von Steuben, because they're contemporary at Kenny's, right? George and
Yeah, maybe
he was
2 years younger, but yeah.
could have been Greisel, could have been Von Steuben. My dad's first 2 services for Detroit Public Schools were Von Steuben and Greisel. And then he went to Nolan Junior High School, spent 21 years there. And at Nolan Junior High, Benny Maupin, my father was a trained clarinetist all the way up through his master's degree in education. He was a trained clarinetist, but a self-taught pianist. And so...
That's what he worked on. He played gigs in cocktail lounges and in big bands playing piano.
Yeah. My dad was a professional pianist. My father had one sister, and the parents, my grandparents, could only afford one private lesson per student, per child. And my grandpa, he worked as a boiler inspector at Ford Rouge plant and had a barber shop on Michigan Avenue. And even then, it wasn't enough money to really live a fancy lifestyle. But they got lessons, and his sister Doris took piano. And my dad took clarinet lessons, and but he learned every piano lesson that she got.
Yeah,
he went to school on her and doubled, and Benny Maupin was Benny Maupin was a student at Nolan, and
you guys know that name?
Yeah, Benny Maupin.
My dad moved.
You have
Ed
Benny
Hunter's,
Maupin?
Ed Hunter's,
yes,
a bunch of stuff,
and Miles Davis.
Yeah.
My dad moved. Benny Maupin's a big, well-known in the jazz community for his work on bass clarinet.
Yeah, he was tenor sax and bass clarinet. I met him once.
My dad moved him over to bass clarinet. But
he's famous for that now.
He's just a kid from this Detroit in the music schools named Benny Maupin, and he played clarinet. And my dad said, "Well, I need you to play bass clarinet," and he took one. That's what band teachers do. These were just kids to my dad. I always asked him about this. I said, "Dad, does it mean a lot to you that you touched so many of these great musicians and changed their lives and stuff, and they became these great professional artists?" He says, "John, they were just kids from Detroit. My job was to turn them into better human beings. That was my job as a teacher, was to make them better human beings and make them better citizens of this world. And I guess I succeeded." Case closed. He didn't really talk about it much. Johnny Bedanjic, one of the world's great rock and roll drummers in all history, started out with my dad. My dad taught him his rudiments, but there's a big discussion about that, because Jimmy McCarty says, "I taught him how to play drums," and that's a fair statement. Jimmy McCarty was a heavy rock and roll player, and he taught him how to do what he needed him to do. But my dad taught him his rudiments, and Johnny Bedanjic to this day still says, "No. Freddie Paxton taught me how to play drums." So that's my dad. If it's 63-year card-carrying member of Local 5, played all over Metro Detroit for his whole career,
and Mackinac.
And we could go on for a long time about my dad's history. Right now, I'm playing the London Chop House. My dad played the London Chop House for 50 years.
Wow.
I was just looking at a buddy of ours who worked at Joey's Stables for 15 years. My dad had a house gig at Joey's Stables in Delray for 15 years. My dad was...
Joey's Stables in Wyandotte, John, I think.
Well, Delray. I thought it was in Wyandotte too, but Nolan said Delray, and he worked there for 15 years.
Oh, so. Yeah. Well, Nolan knows.
Yeah, exactly. He worked there for 15 years. But it was just Detroit stories, man. It's pretty cool.
We used to go there when I lived down that way.
Big, long history. My dad was a great player, man. He was one of those guys that could play in all 12 keys and improvise in all 12 keys. And if he had a bass player with him, they wouldn't even talk to each other. He would just do an interlude and set up a tune with a rhythm dominant pedal point or something, and then go in and play the tune, and then they would modulate in through an interlude and go off into another tune. He'd just do 5-song medleys and stuff and just play through all the keys and stuff, and he's just a remarkable guy.
So, John, tell people about growing up in a house like that. I know you're.
That was my original point.
The records.
Yeah, that was my original point. So, see, I came from this house where my dad was always going out of the house to play music, sitting
wearing
out of the house
tux,
to play piano, my older brothers would be having rehearsals with full-size bands in the living room, you know. But I had this record collection from my mom and dad that was fantastic, man. You know, I mean, all of the great jazz players pre-war, you know, pre-war jazz players. You know, my dad's favorite piano players were Earl Hines and Art Tatum and Earl Garner.
Sound like your house?
Dominic,
yeah?
Yeah, right.
What's it like at your house? I don't know.
You know?
There's a lot of Oscar Peterson.
Oh, yeah.
Oscar too. And my dad loved the piano playing band leaders, you know, Basie and Ellington, man. And but Teddy Wilson was probably the guy that he went towards most.
Oh man, can't go wrong with Teddy Wilson.
Yeah, because Teddy was kind of in the middle, you know. He could play real percussive. He could play great support. He could play really nice right hand solo. He didn't have a giant left hand. My dad didn't either. So he simulated Teddy Wilson's way of striding without having that gigantic handy 10th. You know, the best striders have that 10th. They want to be able to drop that 10th. You know. And so, yeah, Teddy Wilson was huge. But, man, I had this amazing record collection, you know, full of King Cole
Sinatra.
Trio and
Billie Holiday.
and Ellington and Basie and other things like the world's greatest jazz band. That was a very influential record for
Yank
me.
Lawson,
Yank
baby.
Lawson and Bob Haggard. You know, we just had a lot of cool
Big
stuff to
noise
listen
from
to.
Winnetka.
The jazz vegetables, if you will.
Yeah,
Not as in like vegetables like humans, but as in like your greens, you know? Like the stuff that you need to like digest, you know?
Oh, okay.
Get your vitamins.
Took me a minute to get that one. All right. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was just about to say.
The jazz vitamins, if you will.
The jazz
Vitamins.
Vitamins. Yes.
so then I also had a gigantic classical library and opera and American Songbook Broadway and stuff. So we had all of this stuff, and then I being the youngest of 8, all of my older brothers and sisters, I had all of their records too.
Oh, jeez.
So you know they was really. I mean,
Dave's a trumpeter.
the first 10 years of my
piano
life.
player, you know. Yeah.
The first 15 years of my life, I was absolutely consumed with listening to music and just playing my instrument and just listening. I mean, I would listen to the music at 110 dBs as loud as the stereo could go, or I would be sitting down in the room by myself with headphones every day. I just consumed it so that when you get that for the first 10 years of your life, you're just so completely ingrained into it, you know, and that was huge. Now, my dad's education stopped in 1945.
Where did he go? Did he go to Wayne State?
Yeah, he graduated from Wayne, but his musical education stopped after World War II because he got married and went on to have this gigantic, huge family. So all he did was gig 5 nights a week and teach 5 days a week. So he taught 5 days a week and gig 5 nights a week and was busy trying to build a family post-war.
Well, he was sending how many kids to Catholic school?
Exactly. Well, he didn't study bebop. Basically, what I'm saying is my dad stopped at the end of World War II as far as, like, he
wasn't a Coltrane man.
He didn't have time to delve into bop. You know, he appreciated it. He loved it.
Harold Gardner is as modern as he got.
Yeah, but you know, he didn't have time to go into it. You know, he loved Clifford Brown and Max Roach, but it wasn't, you know, he was about doing his thing, doing it well, making sure there was money on the table to feed his growing family. So he never really stopped. But I mean, I still had all of that music, and that's where my roots came in. So I needed this box set that I listened to, practically wore it out, the Smithsonian Institution's collection of classic jazz. I wore that out. So that's where I started to get exposed to Charlie Parker and Coltrane. And this was just smatterings and this and that's, you know. But then when I met RJ and the crew, they opened up my whole world. I'd already had so much music already in me, and they showed me that, man, dude, you only seen like a couple of miles in the music business. We want to take you for a walk around the state or the world here, and they just,
and you were ready, John.
They opened up my mind, and that's what.
But he was ready for it, man.
Yeah, they opened me up, man. I didn't know nothing about Sun Ra, you know, and I mean, you know.
But now you do.
Yeah, it was on there. You
for
know,
40 years, you know.
Yeah, and you know. Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that's how my world opened up. And then when I saw these guys doing all of this very, very vibrational, emotional, soul-shattering, shaking stuff. I mean, that's what I saw at the Lions Club. Plus, we were 3 deep, man. I had a girl on my lap and another girl on one leg. We were stacked up 3 deep to be in this place, man. I mean, there was like
it was packed.
150
We're in
people.
COVID times. We don't understand what it's like to be on top of people, but back then you could do that. You know,
I mean, yeah, but it was really vibrational, and it just blew me away. And so then I started coming around as much as I could, and but I was a Wayne State music student, so I didn't really join the band officially until 2 years later.
Yeah,
A long story.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I guess that's what we're here to do, right?
It's a podcast. It's where you talk about things. So yeah, we like it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
The tings.
Yeah. So John and I guess jump ahead. This band named Coomba, by 1980, changed its name to the Sun Messengers, and we kind of changed our direction and became a little less avant-garde, and we were playing like some New Orleans type stuff, like we got into like Neville Brothers. Are you hip to that kind of thing? Okay, well, you guys, I'm gonna leave you all with homework.
Please do.
Please do.
Leave the audience with homework too.
Yeah. I mean y'all in the microphone and y'all in the room. But Mardi Gras Indians. Everybody who's listening.
Well, that was a little later too.
But still, you need to Google Mardi Gras Indians. But this is the direction we started moving into. Because you mentioned in this bio that we started backing up these New Orleans guys. And this is because in the 80s, we started moving into playing songs by New Orleans guys. We started doing Iko and this kind of thing. We started learning these songs from the New Orleans diaspora. And we started doing swing tunes. And that's because Sun Ra was playing like Fletcher Henderson tunes. And we thought, man, these songs are cool as could be. What's this about? Well, our guitar player at the time was a guy named Paul Carey, which I had grown up with Paul right here in Grosse Pointe. His name was Paul Bauhoff, Paul Carey Bauhoff, but no one could say Bauhoff. They would say Bauhoff. They never said it right. So he just went by Paul Carey. Paul, unfortunately, died 2 years ago, but he was one of my friends since Boy Scout camp. We grew up together. And Paul had been playing some gigs with some nutty guy. It was, how do I explain this group? It was kind of a black society group. We would play black cotillions, black dances. But this guy was not much of a musician, but he felt it was a good idea to have a white guy in the band. So he would hire Paul to be in the group. And Paul thought, some of these guys are really good musicians. So he started getting their phone numbers. And one of them was this guy named Lou Barnett. And Lou Barnett was a hell of a saxophone player. Lou Barnett had played gigs with Billie Holiday. Lou Barnett had spent years in the Aretha Franklin touring road band. Lou Barnett was a saxophone player. He was a Paradise Valley legend, played at the Flame Show Bar, the Club 360s, the Club Sudan, the Club Congo. He played all up and down. Now, you guys know anything about Paradise Valley? This is education. You guys need to be on all your podcasts. I'm telling you, education, or as Harold McKinney would say, edutainment. Paradise Valley was the entertainment district that culminated at the end of Black Bottom, that was now where 375 comes in to downtown. They wiped out Paradise Valley. It was the downtown of Black Detroit. And they wiped it out to bring the freeway into downtown Detroit. But this is where Black Detroit strutted its stuff.
Hastings.
For all the clubs were Hastings Street.
Hastings Street.
Yep. This is where all the record stores, some were owned by Jews, because this is where, like now you go to a lot of stores in the black neighborhoods and they're owned by Arabs and so forth. Well, back then, Jews owned a lot of the mercantile shops. But this is where you went to a lot of the nightclubs, Flame Show Bar, Club 36s, Club Sudan, Club Congo. These were the great nightclubs of Detroit. And this is when Detroit was operating 360, 24 hours a day. All the shifts were going all around the clock at all the automotive plants. Detroit was the 5th largest city in America at this point. You remember this? Mm-hmm. At one point, Detroit was the 5th largest city in America. It's hard for you to believe this, but it was. Think about that. And so the black population of Detroit had its own downtown, just on the cusp of the white downtown. And it has its own complete separate Club B and C. All these are legendary nightclubs. And people are being discovered and assigned to labels. And Lou Barnett was a veteran of all these clubs. And Paul, he's hearing this old guy play sax on the gig. He's like, well, the leader of the band kind of sucks, but man, this sax player is blowing some stuff. Now, Lou Barnett, by this time I was 25, and Lou was 65. He just retired from his Ford Motor Company, or as they would say, Ford's, and we offered him a spot in our band as Sun Messengers. We'd been around for just a couple of years, and we were starting to win. Back then, it was called the Motor City Music Awards. It wasn't Detroit Music Awards. The Motor City Music Awards. And we were starting to win some awards, and we were starting to, make a little noise around Detroit. We were filling nightclubs. We were starting to pack people in at nightclubs around Detroit.
Right.
We were doing well. We were working 17, 18, 20, 25 nights a month, just staying in Detroit.
Yep.
We could play that much in Detroit. Play that many nights a week in Detroit. Filling clubs. This is how people went out.
Yeah.
There was no Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They hadn't changed the drunk driving. I mean, people were going out to party. Young people, old people. We would play at Alvin's Finer Deli right there in Cass, which is now that place Tony's, I guess it is. I don't know what
Tony
it is.
V's?
Or maybe it's now it's the Carhartt. I don't know what it was.
Oh yeah, no, it's Tony V's.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Back then, it was a great place called Alvin's, and you would play over there, and you could make $900 on a slow night, $1,500 on a good night, any Friday or Saturday night of the year.
Wow.
At the door, at $5 a head, and in the audience, it would be packed, and there'd be a 21-year-old and a 22-year-old boyfriend girlfriend dancing, and next to them would be they're professors from Wayne State. They might be 55 or 65.
Wow.
People came out. It didn't matter how old you were. There was no ageism. There was black people, white people. People were mixed up in our youth. It was like that.
Oh yeah, man.
People didn't care. It didn't like, oh, there's old people here. There's young people. Nobody cared about that stuff. If you dug the music, it was your spot. Come on in. And people came out. We used to play this place called Galligan's. It was just a roof deck bar. It only fit like 60 people. We made $1,000 at the door at that gig always. And it was still $5 a head. Because people, they would get turnover. People would come and go. $1,000
Wow.
at the door. People came out. You could have a 10-piece band when we were kids because people came out to support live music. And we had rooms in Traverse City, 2 in Lansing, 2 in Ann Arbor, 1 in Lansing, 1 in Kalamazoo, 2 in Grand Rapids. And then we would start expanding to other states. That's what we did back then, right? So Lou Barnett comes and joins our group.
Late
It was
83, early 84.
So maybe early. I don't know. I can't remember, but
It could have been as early as late 1983. Could have been like November.
But like we were, like I said, we were modernists. We were Coltrane. We were into jazz. I'm here. Look at my shirt. Look what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
And
Just on record, RJ's wearing a train
hoodie. Yeah.
It looks stupid cool.
I still am a modernist, but I love it all, right? So I'm playing with Lou on stage, and he plays body and soul, and I'm telling you, he sounds just like Coleman Hawkins. I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's not like you're hearing on some scratchy old record. It's this guy 6 feet away from you on stage. And to have that revelatory feeling and to feel that in your heart and your soul, it knocks you out. And it changed us. Like James O'Donnell and Tbone and I and Rick, my co-leader. Like Rick was already into swing music, mad at that point, But the three of us, it changed us for the rest of our lives. Like there was a guy named Russell Green who was kind of the equivalent of them on trumpet. He'd played in a Jimmy Lunsford band, and he retired to Detroit and was playing around town. He took James and Tbone in as their proteges on brass, and they studied with him. And that's why James can play all that wild swing era trumpet stuff on the trumpet, and he taught Tbone the same thing on the trombone. But it changed the way I wanted to play music from then on, because I heard what he was doing. I suddenly, I'll always want to play modern jazz, but now I want all of it. I don't want to just play one slice. It's all there for me. It's all there for you too. It's all for all of us. The Great American Songbook, New Orleans jazz, the 20s, the 30s. All of this is there for all of us, is what I believe. That's all I want to say.
Yeah. Well, that was a wonderful story.
Man,
it's so nice to hear.
You guys are just pouring so much information out.
Yeah.
It is so warming. It feels so great. I mean, you wouldn't like. I'm glad that people get to hear these stories, because if they didn't, they would have to come and ask you guys and like come over your houses and do that stuff. But I'm glad we get to provide that for people in Detroit and people who are outside of Detroit, and they get to see the history of what has happened.
Right. I mean, I feel like it's still that entity. I mean, that spirit of what you guys are talking about is still here.
Right. It's still here.
It's like dimmed down, but I still. I genuinely think that people are still hungry.
I hope so. I always say that I learned that stuff when I was 25 playing with a man who was 65, and now next week I'm 64 years old next week.
Woo woo.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
And well, I need to freshen my cognitive, but I'll probably roll something. But anyway, I always say that in our band we have Matt LaRusso on guitar, who's knocking on 30, and Jeff Cooney, who's just a little younger than him, on bass. And our thought is, 40 years from now they'll be playing these songs with some people and say, 40 years ago, I learned this song from these two crazy old guys, Tbone and RJ. And they learned it from 40 years ago from a guy named Lou Barnett. And it's a part of a continuum for black music being passed on. That's the goal. Am I right, Tbone?
No, it's absolutely the goal. It's ultimately still an oral history.
It's a gift that we're trying to pass on.
It's an oral history. I mean, it was definitely, a lot of it was still orally done, even in the 20th century. Even when you had sheet music and you had records, it was still elders passing it on to the youngers. And then this also goes back to this transplantation of holding on to history and keeping it and preserving it and giving it to the next generation. And this goes back to what RJ's original first point of griots, which really are from the Horn of pretty much most of Western Africa, Mali, and these are itinerant history passers. These are itinerant spiritual musicians that traveled the back roads and all the villages to move through areas to tell people their collected stories, and in return for that, they would get housing and food.
I'm good for now.
Yeah, So that's just that whole idea of passing it on and passing it forward, and that legacy's real, and that is a nice thought. Hopefully, we will do that. I just I see myself as a regular, just a regular guy, but my buddy RJ is pretty special, because the bio that you're reading is about our relationship together as musical brothers in regards to this record, but RJ's career is much deeper and much more vast, and the things that he's done are truly remarkable. And I'm grateful to be in that. I'm grateful to be in his orbit, and we're equals and dear brothers and lifelong brothers in music and stuff. But RJ, just for the audience, the listening audience, to know that this bio that you read is definitely geared towards our record project together and focusing on me probably more than RJ, and his career is truly remarkable, and it's worthy of numerous podcasts. You could interview RJ probably for 12 hours.
Talk a lot
on all of the people that he's worked with, and Johnny Bassett and Albert Adams and on and on and on and on, the pioneers of Motown.
Did you look at my own bio as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We wanted to include both of you guys since we're having both of you on the podcast.
I understand. Yeah.
You mentioned how you are still teaching orally. We just had Sean Dobbins on the podcast, and he was
a brilliant cat. He is
amazing drummer.
So cool.
And he was talking about how you would have musicians and educators would be like, go on the bandstand, and the person just like, I don't know what tune they're playing. Yeah, go on anyways, So it's just it's an amazing thing to hear that is not only is that that's still happening. So it's really interesting how you guys are mentioning that it is an oral tradition. That's how you guys are learning. You guys have, not only are you guys continuing the tradition, but you are rooted in the tradition. So it's really nice to be able to hear that. We want to kind of talk about, your time in the Sun Messengers and how that kind of has carried over to, your other bands, like your quartet and the Planet D, Nanette. Can you talk a little bit about, the lineage moving from those bands and stuff?
Yeah, let me pick it up as the lineage, because that's a good way of putting it. After, in my mid-30s, I'd been in Sun Messenger then for about 17 years, and I thought, wow, I've been with this band my entire life. And I thought, I had a three-way kind of band leadership with my partner Rick and my buddy Paul. I thought, personally, I could do better as my own leader. I love them. They're smart guys, but I didn't want to have to bounce ideas off anybody else anymore. I wanted to make my own decisions. And Rick would be better off without me bouncing ideas off of me. He could run the band better. He has done very well doing it his own way without me being there. I'm trying to be delicate here and not insult anybody because I love Rick. But I think that Rick had his own idea of how he wanted to run the Sun Messengers. And I had been there a long time, and they were moving into being more of an event band. And I didn't want to be in an event band. I wanted to play for live audiences still. I knew that I can get record deals. They'd kind of give up on that idea, But I knew I could do that. And I did. I saw a guitar player at the jazz festival named Johnny Bassett. I went and got his phone number. I called him up. I said, I met him at a gig that he was playing. We talked. I said, look, let me book you on a little gig. I'll put a little band together around you with some of my friends. And we'll play a little gig. And I packed this little bar with my friends. And he said, his eyes were wide. He goes, okay, let's do some stuff. I got that guy a record contract at a little label in Detroit, a label in Minneapolis, a label in New York City, a label in Netherlands. I was able to do some stuff with him. We toured through the United States, coast to coast in Canada, and all throughout Europe. And I did all that, before I was 40 with him. Between 35 and 40, I was able to do all that, all after leaving the Sun Messengers.
Wow.
The smartest thing I ever did. I knew that if I left the Sun Messengers, I still had this in me, right? So after a couple years with Johnny, I started adding some people to my stable, other artists along that line. And for 15 years, that's what I did. I started booking these artists, and I put a band together to back them. And I sent them around the country and across Europe and getting them record deals and doing that same thing. They were all older artists, and eventually they all died off. But they were all singers, and I love singers. Let me go on the record here. Jazz guys, don't diss singers. Your dad's a great singer, Dominic Waddles. I love people who entertain people. Folks come to bars to have a good time. Now, jazz, as you know, I'm a modernist. I love Coltrane. I love jazz. I love solos. I love all that stuff. But people come to have a good time. You have played on some gigs with me and Tbone. You see what we're doing.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just, it's a little aside about getting to that. But people come out to have a good time. We don't just play jazz clubs. We play bars that are just bars. And we're just trying to make a living. So every bar can't be some exclusive jazz joint where everyone's clapping after solos. Sometimes you're just making a living entertaining people. And that's how you make a living. That's where you make a living, is being able to play a lot of places. That's how you can play 20 nights a month. And we've had 21 gigs last February. 21 gigs Tbone and I and the band did. 21 gigs. We're set to do the same thing in March, except COVID came along and nipped our wings. Anyway, so I did that for a bunch of years. And then all those their singers were older, and eventually that period of my life ended. But I had a great run doing that, and I made some darn good records, and I saw the world from back of a van or a plane, playing with some really great musicians. Keith Kaminsky, who now he's been for 15 years now. He's been with Bob Seger. Dwight Adams. How many years has he been with? Stevie Wonder. Mm-hmm. Some of his very first tours of Europe with playing with us and his projects that I'm talking about. We made great records and great times, and these are dear lifelong friends. Anyway, when that came to an end, I said, what I started with the Sun Messengers, I never really finished. I felt, the beginning of the Sun Messengers, because before it turned into an event band, we had some stuff that we were doing, and I want to pick that up again. So I called up Tbone and James, and we started practicing in 2007, and that's the Planet D. And so really the New Orleans side of that band, we keep going with the project with Tbone. Mm-hmm. Like, you guys are part of this whole thing that we're talking about, passing this on, like this information, like Matt went to MSU and Jeff went to Michigan State, but they didn't have all this information that I've talked about so far. Mm-hmm. They didn't know that they're apparently jazz history classes at either of these colleges. They don't talk about all the stuff that I talk about.
I feel like because there's so much history, you got all the scenes, you can't. Yeah. You can't encapsulate all the scenes of
maybe that's
jazz in one semester.
Well, they take it in a way where it's like this is the general of jazz, because there's many. I would say 20% of the class of my jazz history class, they weren't even music majors. These are people that were business majors.
My nephew took Vincent Chandler's class, and he's a business major.
Right, and it's just like, it's great because even me, I learned new records. Like one great record that I didn't know about was Wynton Marsalis's Black Codes.
Oh, I know that record.
I didn't know anything about that, but he played it. I was like, man, this is out of the world.
Yeah.
And then each teacher has their own niche. And Vincent Chandler's was mainly a lot of Coltrane. And I really like that.
Well, yeah,
So,
you can't go wrong with Coltrane.
The other thing about the jazz history classes, it's like, because it's such a small time frame for, teaching all this stuff, especially trying to talk about like the essence of it, you can't talk about somebody like Sun Ra. They're not gonna show off all of his music. They're gonna be like, what made Sun Ra Sun Ra? Oh, they might show some of his like really more avant-garde stuff,
Right.
but they might not talk about like
Languidity.
or like his more like grooving stuff.
Yeah, right.
That kind of
That's
stuff.
Languidity, yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a song and I can't think of it right now, but it's very similar to like Pharoah Sanders, like Creator Has a Master Plan
Oh, okay.
kind of vibe. And,
Yeah.
and I just can't.
Well, he covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
One time I saw him at. You guys know who Donald Walden was?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Donald Walden had a loft in Detroit that he presented jazz at, and I saw.
Oh yeah.
I saw Sun Ra at Donald Walden's loft one time, and one time in the middle of the show, he just broke it down to Sun Ra, the drummer, and there's the one time I saw him with the sax player Pat Patrick. Pat Patrick's on all those classic old 50s Sun Ra records, but he didn't tour with the band in the years that I saw him, except for this one time. And Ra broke it down to like 40 minutes of just playing barrel house blues on piano with the drummer at Pat. Mm-hmm. I never saw that before. It was a one time.
The record I was thinking of was Sleeping Beauty
I don't know that one.
by Sun Ra.
All right.
But it is
it's like 1,000.
yeah, it's more it is more like groove oriented stuff. This is from 79.
Ah.
But it is like kind of in the Languidity kind of vibe.
Yeah. Rod did a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah.
Jazz history is very complicated. In a traditional university music course, a degree, and you'd have to study European music history for 3-4 years. 4, 8, 12 semesters. And that's really the way jazz history needs to be taught, because 500 years of classical development in classical art forms have been shrunk down to 50 in jazz. Okay, so it's like this intense distillation is squeezing on this European art form, squeezing it down from 500 years to 50 years, and then all of this rhythm-based, syncopation-based aspects colliding with this European pedagogy.
Just in the last couple of years.
And just bam, all down into 50 years. And then in top of that, then you have all of the societal and political and social pressures of the 20th century and all of the advancements in the speeding up of the 20th century all at the same time. This modernization, all of this happens at the same time. So there's no way that you could cover it all, because jazz is way deeper than the sound. There's so much more involved in it. What was going on sociologically, politically, on the race front, on the injustice front, on the education front, on the political standing up for your beliefs front, on everything. You could do a semester of jazz history on Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah.
You could do a whole semester of a jazz history course on Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
Philly.
Or Detroit, or,
Chicago.
It's just way too deep. It's just way too deep. It's just, that's what makes this art form so amazing, and that's got a lot to do with why it's gone all over the world.
Sure. Yeah. The other thing is like, there's like literally like you said, there's so much that like the most of what is spent on is like what made jazz, like Louis Armstrong, Miles Davis, Charlie Parker, like these huge names that like, but
the giants.
The more specific stuff, it's like, I think that's what made jazz too. And I think that part of like, you were mentioning like this 500 years of like classical music. It's like, I think a huge contrast is the that jazz in itself is like this innovation music. Like what can you do to like go take it to the next step, you know?
Yeah.
And in classical music, a lot of it was like sticking to the grain and like just, you know, being like kind of like the pencil pusher. And there was really like less innovators, I would say, in classical music, except for when you get to like 20th century, you know? But like in jazz, it was like every single person needs to be like, you know, your own unique voice.
Describing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Well, you know, a couple years ago, I was lucky enough to receive a grant from the Knight Foundation to put on a bunch of concerts at the Scarab Club, which really pushed me to come up with new material for each of these concerts. I had to put on 5 concerts in 2 years with whole new repertoires for each one. Just like they do at the Jazz and Lincoln Center. You know, each of these concerts are. It was hellaciously difficult for me because I had to. It was $52,000, which is impressive, right? But you have to raise matching funds. You think about that. You have to raise $52,000 to go with that, to get that money. Now, some of it can be in-kind donations, but that you have to raise money to go with it, right? And there's educational components, so you have to put on events that are educational around each of these events. So this is a daunting task, you know. Now, God bless the Knight Foundation for offering this thing. You know, they awarded this. It was through the Scarab Club. They gave it officially to the Scarab Club for my concert series, but it pushed the hell out of me, you know. But out of that time, you know, like my guys, like Jeff and Matt, who I'm talking about, what they learned, like they learned a whole repertoire of Louis Jordan tunes, a whole repertoire of Buddy Johnson tunes, a whole repertoire of Benny Moten tunes. You know, we did one of Ellington's small groups. We did a project of Thelonious Monk with right there's a box of CDs right there in front of you there, Rob.
Monk's Dream.
No, that box right in front of me. Yeah, that's it. This is our latest CD. I spent it today filling envelopes with these, and this is our latest CD, and it's Planet Dino Net with John Sinclair. And I just spent the afternoon filling envelopes of these bad boys, and this is us at the Scarab Club as part of this Knight Foundation series. And this is the second CD to come out. We had the Kings of Kansas City, which was a really hard project. We had a 30-some page booklet that Jim Gallert wrote about. It was an essay that he wrote about, Jim Gallert. He does the jazz talk tent at the Jazz Festival.
Yeah.
And he wrote that book, Jazz Detroit Before Motown, with Lars Bjorn.
I think they were mentioning it last year at the Jazz Festival.
Well, every year at the Jazz Festival, there's a jazz talk tent.
Yeah, I know about that.
Right in the middle.
Okay, well, these are the two guys, and they're great guys, both friends of mine. You can imagine Tbone and I. These are the kind of guys, jazz nerds, that we would be hanging out with. You know, we've known Jim Gallert all of our lives, pretty much. I'm going to have to get off and talk about Jim in a minute here because it goes back to an early part of my life. But this is, folks, in podcast land, we do have a new CD out, and I wish you would go to Bandcamp and go to the Planet Dino Net page and think about getting it because it just came out. It's with my mentor, John Sinclair, who does his odes to Thelonious Monk. And we do 2 instrumental arrangements by Scott Gwinnell. And then we do 2 songs where we back up John doing poetry. He does one poem which is kind of like about Tyree Guyton's art, and then brings it back to Monk. It's kind of fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, that's our latest CD, and we have the CD with John here. Now, Jim Gallert was on WDET for close to 20 years.
Yeah.
He was hired to work at WDET by my Uncle Bud. My Uncle Bud was the music director at WDET in 1972. And you guys don't know about my Uncle Bud, but he played in the band called Tribe. Do you guys know the band The Tribe?
Possibly.
The Tribe was a super group when I was a kid. It was, the front line was Marcus Belgrave, Wendell Harrison, Bill Randland on trombone, Harold McKinney on piano, bass player named Rod Hicks, and my uncle Bud on drums. The drummer before my uncle was George Davidson, and after my uncle moved out to California, it was George Davidson again. It was the super group of jazz in Detroit in the mid to late 70s, The Tribe. And they a couple years ago, they made a record called the Philadelphia Experiment, which kind of brought like hip hop elements to.
Oh yeah, they made the Detroit Experiment.
It was based on The Tribe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've listened to that record. There's
Damon Warmack and Kelvin Scholar are on that record.
Marcus is on it.
Yes.
Jerry Allen is on it.
Based on The Tribe.
Yeah, wow.
My uncle was the drummer in The Tribe. And he was also at WDET. And before my uncle at WDET, it was all classical music. And my uncle came along as music director. And he came in, white guy with an afro. I was a white guy with an afro too, by the way. And he came in and busted it wide open and brought in jazz. And my uncle's radio show was called Jazz Today, where he played Coltrane and a whole bit, Elbert Eiler, all that stuff, and Wayne Shorter. And the bookend show was Jazz Yesterday with Jim Galler. And Jim's lasted for another close to 20 years through many different regime changes in public radio. And Jim is our lifelong dear friend and really a jazz mentor to us, because nobody knows more about early jazz than Jim Galler in Detroit, in my humble opinion. Maybe not so humble opinion, folks, because I know a little bit about jazz, and I know a little something about this earlier jazz thing. And Tbone, pick up. You talk a little bit.
It's true, man.
Talk about Jim Galler.
Jim Galler's Jazz Yesterday show is amazing, man.
Hey, I'll add this, a caveat. Every year at Cliff Bell's, and I worked at Cliff Bell's for 3 years as the entertainment director, and it's been a tradition for a decade or more. James Carter comes in and does a gypsy jazz show at Christmas time at Cliff Bell's every year. And every year, his MC is always Jim Gallard. And he always talks about how he heard Django Reinhardt on Jim's show. Jim is his mentor for old jazz records. He always calls up Jim, and Jim burns some things, and they talk on the phone and keep in touch.
Absolutely.
That's the esteem that Jim Gallard is held in by people even like James Carter.
Mm-hmm. James Carter would call Jim Gallard on the phone to request when he was in high school. He would have requesting Jim to play Adrian Rollini, so that he could hear Adrian Rollini play the bass saxophone. You
guys don't know. Adrian Rollini was a wild multi-instrumentalist. Are you Googling Adrian Rollini right now? Yeah. Good. I love that about you, Mark. Yes, Adrian Rollini was an interesting He played the vibraphone and the bass sax, and his brother was a musician too. And yes, he was kind of a contemporary of the Benny Goodman and that kind of era, 20s into the 30s kind of guy. And he played many instruments and lived a fairly long life and exist anyway. Yeah.
So that would be no problem for Jim Gallard, because he had a record collection that would fill these walls, and he would just go and pull out his Adrian Rollini records and take them to WDET and play Adrian Rollini for James Carter. He already had them. He knew exactly what he was talking about. No problem. Yep. Just let me get him and I'll play him for you. Yeah.
That's a great example. Yes. We used to go to Jim's house when Rick Stagger and I would go to Jim Gallard's house when we were in high school. Just kids wanting to learn about jazz. And Rick knew Jim. And so he says, yeah, go to my friend Jim's house over in Oak Park. Okay. I said, okay. So we go to Jim's house, and we're like, jazz nerds going to our buddy's house in high school. And Jim's older than us. He's a grown man. I mean, he's like 25, and we're like 17, and we're all jazz nerds sitting in the bedroom at some guy's house, listening to records, and he's playing this James P. Johnson, and crazy, records and stuff. And his bedroom, like you're sitting in the bed and there's like records lined up against here. You know what I mean? There's records on the wall. There's records. There's records everywhere. But you go out of the bedroom and there's lines of records against the wall going into the living room, and then there's records in the living room. His mom and dad are sitting there watching TV, and there's records around the living room.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, Jim. Oh yeah, Jim.
He's a special guy, man.
Yeah, he's a record guy. Yeah. He just retired from his day job last year, and is a beautiful cat. Now James Carter, we met him when he was not even he was in junior high school. And by 15, we were hiring him on gigs, and he was subbing in our band as Sun Messengers.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
James Carter was.
We took him on his very first gig out of state.
First road trip, yeah.
Yep. He played my brother's fraternity in Atlanta. His first gig out of state in his entire life.
That's awesome.
And it was mom and dad. I know all his brothers. We used to go, here's a story, because we played a lot of weddings in the Sun Messengers, right? We used to play this wedding palace out in Macomb County called the Hillcrest Club. Now it's no longer there. I don't think it's probably some other name. But you remember the Hillcrest Club, John?
Oh yeah.
The loaded was always greasy and a little dangerous. Like you might slip on your ass because it was so greasy going in and out. It was just this is where you load in and load out. It was like, Jesus Christ, you're taking your life in your hands because the floor is just so slippery,
Oh my gosh!
But
well, I know clubs like that, but they're not like jazz clubs. It's like
no, this is like several floored place,
Oh,
and it was very very Italian, So like they would have they would play the Candy Man, and they would bring up this giant sweets thing. Remember that, John?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it would be 300 Italian people at his weddings and stuff. But they had a club, a separate nightclub. In addition to being a wedding venue, they had a nightclub, a top 40 nightclub, and they had a house band. And the house band, James Carter's brother had the gig, and James Carter's brother, Rob Carter, he's like to singing what James is to saxophone. Like James Carter has chops of steel and can blow and circular breathe and go all night long and do all that stuff. Rob Carter could play 6 nights a week as the only singer in a top 40 band.
wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Rob Carter. Am I right, John?
Oh yeah, man.
We would go and watch him on our breaks and go, look at this mother singing high notes, a falsetto. They just tearing up R&B tunes. It was this magic. It was amazing.
It was amazing. Yeah.
He's still around. Oh yeah, he's an amazing guy.
So kind of moving on to talking about you guys' experience in Detroit and just the Detroit music scene and how it has impacted your life and maybe how you have impacted the Detroit music scene with PD9.
Well, now you've thrown a wrench at the whole affair, haven't you? I'm a reactionary kind of guy. John and I, we just keep on going and do what we do, and we hope that people like what we do. I've been at this a long time and developed a certain amount of contacts, and so people keep on hiring me. They say, "What are you doing now, RJ?" And they bring me back. Am I right, John?
Yeah. I'm lucky for that.
Yeah. So that's what I can say about Detroit. I've been at it a long time, and I'm a fairly genial person. Do you know what I mean by that? I like to get along with people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like people, and I like to get along with them. And I've made a lot of friends in this business. I hate it when they retire because I have to make friends with the next guy.
True.
Sometimes they go and the next guy isn't as nice as the last one. But, this is the business I'm in. I've been at it a long time. I never wanted to leave Detroit. My uncle left Detroit. He was like I said, he's a drummer, and he was a public radio broadcaster, and he was also a producer. He produced live events like he had a great jazz series he did at Cranbrook, you know. Mm-hmm. And then he got offered to run a jazz station in California, in San Francisco. So he took it. I don't blame him. And he had lived the rest of his life in California. And he ended up running a great jazz series out there called Jazz at Filoli, an incredible jazz series. And he got a weekly paycheck year round for running like a 20-week jazz series out there. And he got a weekly paycheck for a once-a-week radio show on public radio out there. And then he played gigs. And he was the number one producer of jazz recordings in the Bay Area. Well, he had many recordings that were Grammy considered. He didn't got any Grammys, but he was on the cusp all the times, you know. Taylor Ikestey and guys like that, you know. He did very well. My uncle, I'm very proud of my uncle. I'm proud that, you know, he was a great jazz guy, and I'm a jazz guy following in his footsteps, you know. I hope someone in my family picks up the gauntlet after me that doesn't die with me, you know. But I never wanted to leave Detroit, you know. I love it here, you know. Detroit's my home. I'm planning on being here until I'm not playing anymore, you know. If I leave, it's because I'm not playing anymore, you know. It's just because I'm sitting on the dock of the bay watching the time go by, you know. It's just something, you know. You know what I'm saying, John? Mm-hmm. Detroit's been pretty good to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, we like seeing the rest of the world. I have been, touring wise, I've been to 48 states, driven through. You know, 8 provinces, probably 20 trips to Europe. I've seen the world, but this is my home. Mm-hmm. Detroit's been, and I'm invested in y'all. You know. I want to see you guys be part of this. I want you two to get a piece of what's going on, and if I can help, I want to help. You know.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's really warming, man.
Yeah.
Like
that's important to me. You know. When I worked at Cliff Bell's, I tried to have a real balanced. I looked at the month and I said, well, what do I have here? You know, and I looked at all the different angles of what I could do. And I tried to make it a balanced picture, you know. And that's what I did, you know. And I enjoyed that gig. But it was time for me to get out. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I'm not dealing with that now.
Especially right now.
Oh, no. This is a good time for me to be at home. Yeah. This is a good time to... Look at this. I'm doing pretty good, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got people coming
living
in your house
comfortably?
asking to do a podcast.
You know?
So, kind of... This is a question posed for both of you guys. We like to ask our guests about their gigs, you know, and we like to ask about your most humorous gigs. Obviously, you guys have done thousands, so we're very curious if you could mention to us some of your more humorous gigs that you might look back on, maybe at the time were just not awesome, but now you look back and you laugh at it, you know.
I can't wait.
Let us know. I'm excited. This was like,
John, this is a tough question, man.
Guys, you got to understand, man. You know,
that's a long time, man.
42 years of doing gigs. Funny gigs, they're hard to pull out because you know, when you enjoy being with your musician buddies, every gig's a funny gig. You find
all
ways
the
to
funny gigs. You got to name names and say something embarrassing about your friends.
Yeah, I mean,
all of them.
as far as funny gigs, you know,
Well,
but
maybe,
as far
yeah.
as funny experiences,
Sure.
that's way easier. We had this school bus. Steiger decided the bus is us. The bus is us because nobody had cars. We did, but a lot of them were really, really beat up. And
Janky.
Other guys didn't have cars, and we got this idea. We ended up. I went out to the behind the airport to pick out this bus with Rick, and this guy was exactly like Mr. Haney from the Green Acres. He really was, you know. I mean, he was a guy who was offering us
Mr. Douglas.
Now I got this good oil here for you, but over here I'll sell you this reconditioned oil. He had ran it through a cheesecloth. You know, I mean, this was what this place is. What, you know, he said, oh, you guys need a bus. You get a band. Okay, so he takes us over to this bus, and it's like a rock and roll bus, like Spinal Tap, but it's tilted on one side. You know, like it's listing like 10 degrees. You know. Well, what's wrong with this? Well, that one just needs a little suspension work on that. Well, you can get that fixed. And Rick said, no, you got to show me something else. And he says, well, what you need is a couple of busettes. And those are those little buses, right? The proverbial short bus, right? You know, the short bus came to pick me up.
Those are the stories, John.
Yeah, because you weren't there.
No.
And then we landed on 57, bus number 57, Detroit Public Schools from 1975, I think the bus was, and we ended
got out of high school.
We ended up buying 57 from 74, 75 or something. And one night we were playing at Sully's, a great club in Dearborn. It was near Christmas. It was like maybe winter solstice. Maybe it was like Saturday the 21st. And my brother Fred was in from the East Coast, and he was hanging out with his buddy, and they were driving the Corvette, and they came out to see us, and gave him a great concert. And
Fred's a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah. He was back at that time. But so on the way home, they went out to get some food. They went to Mexican Town to get some food after the gig. And for some reason, we didn't stay and drink until 5 a.m. that night.
What was wrong with us?
Well, we probably had a gig the next morning we had to get ready to go to because we gigged a lot. And lo and behold, the bus broke down, eastbound 94. And my brother was zipped on by in the Corvette. We put Acunda up in the steering wheel, steering the bus because
Acunda is about 120 pounds soaking wet.
Yeah,
he is our conga player, Acunda Lumumba. He's a beautiful and talented guy. He's played with Aretha Franklin. He's played with all kinds of. He's a talented cat, but he is diminutive. You know, he's not a big man.
And he didn't have a license.
He's never driven a car.
He didn't have a license.
He's never had a driver's license in his life.
But we weren't worried because we knew that the bus was only going to go 2 miles an hour. We pushed the bus up the ramp, up the Harper exit, off I-94. This was a bus completely filled with PA and equipment for a 13-piece ensemble.
Oh yeah,
I think it was.
We had risers, like big staged risers, or made out of plywood and 2x4s. Oh, we had all kinds of gear.
Yeah, we pushed that thing off of the freeway.
Ready to go, man.
We pushed the thing off of the freeway and rolled it all the way home, the final mile home. And somehow we pushed that bus up off the freeway and
into Paul's backyard.
Into Paul's backyard. Kunda steered it home at a half a mile an hour all the way there. He was having the time of his life. And it was it was. And I don't know, it might have even been, no, I think it was before Lyman Woodard was in the band. So
you guys know Lyman Woodard?
We didn't have the Hammond B3 in the
Lyman Woodard organization is like a classic Detroit stable.
Yeah, he was a legendary Hammond organist in Detroit. He was in our band for a couple of years. You have to ask. You guys need to have Leonard King in this podcast.
You should.
You need Leonard King in this podcast.
Wow, that was a magnificent conversation.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe on all our social media, and we hope to see you soon.